Trouble with Dragons by Katy Haye. The stables were on fire, because of course they damned well were. It was an occupational hazard, especially at full moon, or when the weather was stormy, or if the beasts were bored, or there was some kind of feud going on between the dragons. Happened once or twice a week, in summary. Bram donned a fireproof cloak and ran towards the building. He glanced aside at the apprentices who were assembling into a line from the well to the stables to create a bucket chain to dampen the flames. That had been him last year. But just a week ago he'd been promoted to journeyman, second class. It was his job now to get inside and calm down the dragons, since the fire wouldn't end until either they stopped belching out clouds of the stuff, or everything flammable in the building was turned to ash. "Get inside!" He was nearly there when the principal stepped into sight, her hair lightly singed and smuts darkening her cheeks. "What are you dithering about out here for?" "Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am." The principal was terrifying, which was a requirement of the job when she regularly needed to be more terrifying than literal fire-breathing dragons. Hurrying onwards, Bram tugged the hood of his cloak over his face to give him the best chance of ending the night with his eyebrows intact. Then he lowered his head and stepped through the fiery doorway into an approximation of hell. 4 of the dragons, half of them, were engaged in. Bram couldn't tell immediately whether it was a fight or a contest to see who could do more damage. He threw up an asbestos-gloved hand to shield his eyes and scanned the scene, heart thudding as he tried to decide what approach would end the destruction quickest. 3 of the 4 dragons simultaneously paused to draw in a breath, and Bram saw past them to the end of the stables. Ophelia was curled up in her stall, snout tucked into the curve of her tail, as though deliberately blocking out the rowdy actions of the others. Ophelia was the youngest dragon in the stables, but she was Bram's favourite. She was female, and thanks to the skewed gender balance in dragons, where 9 males hatched for every 1 female, she had natural authority, when she could be prevailed upon to use it. Bram's vision was blocked again when the older dragons blasted fire at each other once more. A yell from outside reminded him of the urgency, and the fact that the principal would be judging his success, or lack of it. Tugging his hood down once more, Bram lowered his head and charged through the fire. Heat pressed against him like a solid force. The fact it was coming from both sides kept him on his feet, although it seemed he might be crushed to a sliver between the blasts. It was painful to breathe, the air scorching the hairs inside his nostrils. He pushed on, heart pounding, lungs demanding oxygen. A few more steps and he broke through to cooler air. Sometimes the dragons deliberately breathed fire on the journeyman, as though it was some kind of a joke. Bram was glad they didn't try that on him. Not this time, at least. He pelted the final few steps and grabbed the gate of Ophelia's stall to swing to a halt. He pushed back his hood far enough to see one large eye blink open, then close again, as though making a deliberate choice to ignore him, the same way she was ignoring the fighting dragons. Bram smiled. Ophelia could pretend it wasn't her problem all she liked. Everyone had to work together at times like these. "No." As he twisted the latch and swung the gate open, Ophelia's refusal rang in his mind. The psychic links dragons and their riders shared, enabling communication both could understand. Bram ignored her. He stepped into her stall and swept a deep bow. "Lady Ophelia, I need your help." "I said no." "We are helpless without you." Bram had known the dragon since she was a hatchling. She thrived on feeling important. "Go ahead," she prompted, when he deliberately waited her out. "Your fellows fight like fools. They'll destroy the stables if they continue like this." "What do I care? We dragons can sleep in the open as nature intended." "It's November," Bram pointed out. "You'll freeze." They wouldn't. Thick dragon hides would ensure they were safe. But safe wasn't the same as comfortable, and Ophelia did like a little bit of luxury. The dragon shifted, arching her long neck so her scales glinted, reflecting the orange of the flames at the other end of the stables. "You know my price." Her voice rumbled, rattling Bram's bones even though she didn't speak aloud. "You drive a hard bargain," Bram complained, but there was little heat to it. He fished in the pocket of his cloak, gloved hands clumsy. There. Finding what he needed, he lifted a hand triumphantly, presenting the ruby between thumb and forefinger. It's a little small," Ophelia complained. Bram grinned. "It's bigger than nothing," he pointed out. "You speak truly, little one." "Do you accept it?" Ophelia took a moment to pretend she needed to think about it. Another blast of fiery air warmed Bram's back. The principal was going to kill him if the dragons didn't do the job first. Very well. Ophelia spoke as though she were doing him a favour. But then he supposed she was. He threw the ruby towards her head. Ophelia snapped it from the air with powerful jaws, then nosed in the corner of her stall, setting the gem in pride of place amongst the bits and pieces of mostly junk that currently formed her hoard. Once it was placed to her satisfaction, she swung around, eyes gleaming. Her mouth opened with a roar that belonged on a dragon 3 times her size. Bram crouched, hands clapped over his ears. He twisted. The 4 dragons froze, jaws snapping shut, smoke puffing from flared nostrils. Ophelia snarled, tail lashing. 3 of the dragons backed down immediately, retreating into their stalls, sitting down abruptly, tails wrapped around their hindquarters. The 4th had some foolish idea of challenging Ophelia. He stood straighter, neck stretching so he faced her squarely, mouth opening as he sucked in a deep breath that had Bram cringing, expecting the gout of fire that usually followed. It didn't come. Ophelia snorted and held eye contact with the challenger. Instead of a blast of fire, a dribble of flame drooled from one side of his mouth. He huffed, pawed at the ground and copied the other 3, retreating to his stall, turning around and lying down with his tail wrapped around himself. Bram heard the cheers from the apprentices outside. His shoulders slumped. The first fire he'd been in charge of stopping, and he thought it had gone as well as he could have hoped. He straightened and bowed again. "Thank you, Lady Ophelia." She inclined her head, a queen acknowledging her subject. Bram ducked another bow and took a step towards the doorway. "Next time, the jewel should be bigger." Bram glanced at the 4 dragons, now watching him from their stalls, acting as though they were innocent of any transgressions. An awful, shocking, obvious thought occurred to him, sending ice down his spine. He turned to face Ophelia fully. "Did you put them up to this?" Ophelia leaned forward, a single large eye looking straight at him. "I encourage their childish acts? Why in the skies would I do that?" "Because you get a shiny jewel each time," Bram thought, but didn't say. On the off chance she wasn't doing it on purpose, he didn't want to give her the idea. A final bow. "My apologies, Lady Ophelia. I meant no insult. Of course you wouldn't encourage such childish tomfoolery." He strode towards the stable doorway, tugging off his gloves as he went. Heavens alone knew how the principal was going to react when he confided his suspicions. He wondered if they could afford enough jewels to prevent the destruction, rather than stopping it once it started. Bram shook his head. He wasn't sure whether that would be pragmatism or capitulation to a protection racket. Still, that was the principal's problem. He was only a journeyman, 2nd class. That was The Trouble with Dragons by Katy Haye. If you want more stories, hit follow and you'll be notified the next time a story goes up. Thanks for listening.